Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the CCB Connect and Share Cyber Tips webinar. My name is Clara Grillet, and I'm an analyst at the Center for Cybersecurity Belgium. Today's all about a technology that we're using all the time, and that is Wi-Fi. We use it at home, we use it at the office, but is it really secure? We have all been told not to connect to public Wi-Fi, like for instance, when you're at the airport. But what are the risks exactly? And is there anything that I can do to protect my organization or my home? So let's find out. And in order to do that, in order to help us make sense of it all, I am very happy to welcome Héloïse Gollier. Héloïse is a PhD candidate at KU Leuven's DistriNet, and she specializes in Wi-Fi security. Welcome, Héloïse.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me here, and I look forward to answering all your questions.
Thank you so much, Héloïse, for coming here. Really happy to have you on board here. I will admit that when I was a teenager, data was quite expensive. So I remember that I would sometimes connect to Wi-Fi in public cafes and never think twice about it. So this might be a very basic question to start us off. But Eloise, why is public Wi-Fi so bad? And is it really so bad?
Right. So, to kind of explain, I have to first tell you a little bit about the basics of Wi-Fi. So, how does Wi-Fi work? You guys probably know this, but the principle is that you will not communicate using any kind of wire. So, this is very practical. But the issue is that all your traffic gets broadcasted over the air, and so the privacy of your connection depends very strongly on it. Well, it depends pretty much entirely on encryption. Now, if you just connect to an open Wi-Fi network or a Wi-Fi network with a public password, it enables very simple attacks for people to be able to listen in on your connection. There are two attacks that are quite common against networks. So the first one would be passive monitoring. So there, the idea is that a person will simply just turn on their Wi-Fi radio and listen in on your connection. It has the advantage for the attacker that it is pretty much undetectable. It works both on open networks, but also on password protected networks, as long as the password is public for everybody. And there the attacker can simply just read your traffic. Then another kind of attack, which is quite common, is the evil twin attack, where an attacker will actively impersonate your network in order to get you to connect to it. It is more easy to detect, but for the attacker, it's nice because it works on a wider range of networks, as long as the password is public or if the network is open. And here, the attacker can establish a man-in-the-middle position between you and the rest of the internet, so they can both read and also modify your traffic.
Okay, so just to repeat that and make sure it's clear. So encryption is really what underpins Wi-Fi security. Okay, so let's imagine now that the deed is done. I have connected my smartphone to public Wi-Fi. At my hotel, for instance, I check my emails, I logged into my banking app. What are the risks?
All right. So to be able to really evaluate the risks, I would say a good thing to do is to kind of look at what Wi-Fi traffic looks like exactly. For us as Wi-Fi and internet experts, we always like to abstract internet traffic in terms of different layers to make it easier to understand each and every way in which your internet connection works. So the highest layer that you will have in your Wi-Fi traffic is the application layer. The application layer is what will provide the end user application services. So it will do things like format your emails, grant you access to websites, etc., etc. A common protocol that you guys probably already know is HTTP, but also things like DNS or SMTP for your email, for example. So that's your application layer traffic. That traffic in and of itself will be encapsulated in another layer of traffic. That layer is called the network layer. What the network layer will do is that it will make sure that you can efficiently communicate from your device, so from your client or your application, all the way to a server which is providing a service to you. It will find easy routes for your traffic to do, and then that network layer is encapsulated inside a link layer. The link layer will simply provide communication between two nodes. So, for example, in Wi-Fi, that would be they will provide communication between your device as a client and the access points. So you have all these different layers that are connected, that let you communicate with Wi-Fi. Now, why am I explaining all of this? Well, I'm explaining all of this because what I mean when I say that there is no encryption when you connect to an open Wi-Fi network, what I simply mean is that there is no encryption on the link layer. But that doesn't necessarily mean that there won't be any encryption on the network layer or any encryption on the application layer. For example, if you use a VPN, there will be another layer of encryption which will be added on all your network traffic. Also, if you connect, for example, to a website, the website will still encrypt all of your communication between you and the website. So it isn't necessarily the case that you can simply just if you send a password on an open Wi-Fi network, then it is simply visible to all attackers. More often than not, nowadays everything will be encrypted on those higher layers. But that being said, that doesn't mean that connecting to an open network is without its risks. First of all, it is liked by attackers because it can be a first point of entry to launch higher layer attacks to break encryption on higher layers. Another thing is that VPNs are often not used by default, which means that that encryption on the network layer is not that common. And also another thing is that if you don't use a VPN, then an attacker can still observe things like what websites you visit. Even though they cannot know what data you are sending to those websites, they cannot see the passwords, they can still see that you are communicating with a specific website.
Okay, so if I understand that correctly, essentially it means that the risks for a user are rather limited if we connect on a public Wi-Fi, simply because we can rely on some form of encryption running on top of the wireless protocol, right? But you do specialize in Wi-Fi security, and your focus is mostly on organizations rather than, single users. So what I'm wondering now is, as an organization, what are the most frequent types of attacks that you've seen that are involving wireless?
All right. So first of all, it's hard for me to say which attacks are the most frequent because it's hard for us as researchers to really collect reliable data on attacks that really happen in the wild. But in the literature, I encounter many attacks that are actually really quite practical against enterprise Wi-Fi attacks. There are different kinds of attacks that can be performed against different kinds of enterprise Wi-Fi network. There are 4 different kinds of enterprise Wi-Fi networks that are quite common. The first 2 are PEEP and TTLS, and I always address those 2 together because they are roughly the same protocol. So the idea for PEEP and TTLS is that the client, so you with your device, you will authenticate the network using a certificate, and then the network will establish a TLS encryption tunnel where you will send your password as the client to the network so that the network can authenticate you. Now, the problem with this is that the security and the protection of the password you use for network authentication relies almost fully on users being able to validate certificates. And we have found that in practice, it is a little bit difficult for users to be able to evaluate whether a certificate really comes from the legitimate network or whether a certificate comes from an attacker. You see the certificate here on the right. Would you be able to trust this? Would you know whether it is a certificate that comes from a legitimate network or whether it comes from an attacker? I have seen a study which kind of shocked me, where researchers would come in proximity to 400 employees inside a company, and using their own certificate, they would get clients to connect to them and to send their passwords. And using that method, they were able to collect 166 passwords in 40 minutes without being noticed. So that's for PEEP and TTLS. Then another common kind of enterprise Wi-Fi network is IP-PWD, where the client and the network will simply authenticate each other using a password. So it is fully password based. It is relatively secure in my opinion, but it is only secure as long as the users configure strong passwords. Weak passwords can still quite easily be recovered by attackers. Then another method is IP-TLS, where both the client and the network will have their own certificates. and will authenticate each other using their own certificates. So it has the advantage that there are no passwords to be stolen, but the issue is that it can be quite complicated for network administrators to set it up and to maintain their network, which is why it is not always implemented or used in practice. And then there are three other important attacks that I also wanted to get into. The first one is a password spraying attack. So this is an attack that can be performed on any kind of password-based network. So there the idea is that an attacker will try out the same password, but with many different usernames until it finds one username that uses that password. And so if it can find this password, it can use it to gain access to your network. Another kind of common attack is network jamming, where an attacker will simply send out electromagnetic wave in order to interfere with legitimate people's Wi-Fi connection to disrupt traffic. And then a final attack, which can be done if employees are connecting their access point to a company network. The problem is that their own access point might have a weaker security configuration, and this can be used as an easy entry point by adversaries if that is the case. So it is typically not recommended to do this.
Okay, so you were talking about different kinds of attacks there. As a defender, what I'm interested in is how can I actually detect them? Because I think one of the first slides, you were mentioning that some attacks can be undetectable. So of course I'm interested in detection, but also I would like to know whether there is anything that I can do to protect my organization against these types of attacks.
All right. So first of all, if you are an administrator, one thing that I hear about a lot is to deploy wireless intrusion detection or prevention systems, also called WIPs. They are especially useful to disable things like rogue access points, or they can also be used later on to be able to make an autopsy if an attack has occurred by looking at the logs. So it is quite common to have this kind of thing. The only issue that I find with them is that they can be a bit black box, and they don't always have very strong guarantees around what kinds of attacks they can or cannot protect against. So that's for detecting. And then for preventing attacks, a very common thing is to use mobile device management systems. So what does a mobile device management system do? It allows employees to connect to a network, and then once the employee has connected to the network, the MDM will automatically configure or provide a secure configuration for the client that will be installed on the client's device so that they can connect later on again to the network and have a secure connection. Another thing that I would suggest would be to use a passwordless solution like ETLS if you have the time and the means to maintain such an enterprise network. And then the last thing I would suggest would be to otherwise just use EAP-PWD, but only if you can incentivize your users to use strong passwords.
All right, thank you, Héloïse. So what I'm also interested in is if we're talking about different kinds of attacks, and of course, we always need to make choices, right? So if I were an IT admin at an organization, I have a limited budget, I have limited resources. I just want to know, in your opinion, what is the attack that I should prioritize?
So I would say the good thing is that you don't necessarily need to prioritize between attacks. I would say that a lot of attacks can quite easily be mitigated just by making the right choices. If you don't have that much of a budget, I would just suggest using EAP-PWD and incentivizing your users to use strong passwords. That should already mitigate quite a lot of attacks.
Okay, so one thing that I find interesting, and when we're having this discussion, is that you're talking about the importance of passwords and having strong passwords, but also the importance of certificates. Because I think you said there were 166 passwords that were captured using a certificate. So can you tell us a little bit more why it is that it's so important to check certificates?
Yeah. So, as I've explained, the fact that the client can send their password only to the right people depends on the client being able to validate the certificate. If the client doesn't do it properly, then it has no guarantee that it is indeed sending its password to the legitimate network and not just to an attacker pretending to be the legitimate network. So, what I would suggest is to always try to check your certificates whenever they are shown to you by your operating system. So I have shown on this slide a few certificates that can be shown by the operating system. So whenever you see something like, okay, I'm authenticating this network, should I continue connecting? Always ask to see the certificate. Once you see that certificate, you have to look at the server name, the issuer name, and ideally, although I know this is annoying because it just has a lot of unreadable numbers, you also should check the SHA fingerprint. You can ask for what those values are supposed to be to an administrator, and if you find that those values are different from the values that you actually expect to see, or from the values that the administrator told you they should be, then I would suggest taking a screenshot of the certificate that you are seeing, not connecting to the network, and sending the screenshot to your administrator.
So I have a follow-up question to this here. So if I'm a network administrator, where should I publicize those values? For instance, the issuer name and the SHA fingerprint. And then if I'm a user, where should I expect to see those values?
So I would say it can really depend on the company. I know for me at KU Leuven, we just can just kind of Google how to connect to the KU Leuven Wi-Fi network, and usually we will find the instructions there. I would say maybe when onboarding the employee, or well, right now we're just sending out an email to tell users where they can find this information could already possibly help. But yeah, this goes a little bit beyond my expertise, because yeah, I don't necessarily know where where users would check out first this kind of this kind of information. Just try to make it as accessible as possible, I would say.
All right, so network administrators looks like we should have a page somewhere, or maybe an onboarding email, be able to communicate those values really easily.
Mhm.
What I'm hearing from this as well, and tell me if I'm wrong here, is that often when we hear the word user awareness, we associate that with phishing awareness. But what I'm hearing from you, Dan, it sounds like user awareness should also include authentication certificates. Or am I reading this wrong?
You are reading this entirely right. So, unfortunately, now the interfaces with Wi-Fi are made in such a way that it is very difficult for users to be able to distinguish what a correct certificate is from an incorrect one. And so that makes user awareness and informing users on this quite important at the moment.
All right. Um, Now I would like to shift the question a little bit towards security at home. So as you know, a lot of us are using Wi-Fi at home. We're also working remotely. At least we have often the chance to do that. And so for majority of people, that means that we're relying on a router that is provided by an ISP. Is this secure by default?
So I have found a few studies on this. There is a recent study that I found that analyzed the default security configurations of home routers, and they found many issues with most of the routers that they analyzed. So I would say that home routers are definitely not configured securely by default. That being said, this was done on home routers rather than ISP routers, but I would not expect to really see a difference between either the home routers or the ISP routers. Also, a survey that we performed recently at KU Leuven. So we performed a survey looking whether to analyze a lot of different networks, and we looked at whether a certain vulnerability that had been discovered a few years prior would still be present in those networks, or whether the networks had been updated in the meantime. We looked at ISP provided networks and also at regular networks, and we were actually quite surprised to find out that ISP networks were actually more likely to still be vulnerable to the attack in question. Now, this doesn't, I mean, this is just one vulnerability in particular, but it does point to the fact that the assumption that ISP provided networks, that they will always automatically be updated or have the latest security features is not necessarily a correct one. And then finally, I also found another study which compared security configurations across ISP providers, and they could still find a significant amount of ISP routers who by default would still support weak protocols.
But the information you're giving is not reassuring at all.
Um,
So, what would you then recommend to improve your security at home if you have, well, either your own router or if you're are using an ISP router?
All right, so I'm going to repeat myself here, but I think I cannot repeat this enough. So the first thing I would suggest would be to configure a strong Wi-Fi password. I think a lot of people don't realize, but if you configure a weak Wi-Fi password, something that is just a word or a birth date or something like that, it is enough for an attacker to be able to observe one connection between you and your Wi-Fi network, and then just use their laptop to crack your Wi-Fi password in just a matter of a few seconds. So definitely configure a strong password. What do I mean by strong password? I mean, I would definitely suggest using at least 12 characters, no words that are contained in dictionaries, and then trying to add things like special characters, big letters, numbers, etc. So that's for strong passwords. I would also recommend setting a password for your administrator panel. One thing I would definitely recommend is not to enable any kind of deprecated protocol. Deprecated protocols are things like TKIP, WPA, and WEP. Definitely disable those things. And if your router supports it, definitely try to configure WPA3 only if you don't have all devices. If you have devices that might be, I would say, older than 4 years old, something like that, that still need to be connected to your Wi-Fi network, then configure WPA3 transition. And another thing is that you should definitely disable Wi-Fi protected setup. It is a thing that is not really that commonly used anymore in Wi-Fi, and it is an easy entry point for attackers to get access to your network. One other thing would be to perform firmware upgrades regularly to patch any known vulnerabilities. And then if you are a person who has a lot of people over, who also need a Wi-Fi connection, then I would suggest letting them get access to a separate guest Wi-Fi networks. A lot of routers will let you configure this. If you do enable a guest Wi-Fi network, make sure that first of all it is configured with a password, and the password must be different from the password to your regular network.
I have a different question here that I was interested in. So you say we need to have a guest network. Is this also the guest network, or you want to put, for instance, all your house appliances, or do you want to have also a separate network from that?
So house appliances, not necessarily. I would say it's fine to connect them to your regular network. The reason that I'm suggesting that you use a guest network is because remember what I said in the beginning, where I said that if a password is public, if a password is known to a person, then what it means is that they can also access, they can see the traffic that you have with your access points, and so that is the reason why you kind of want to separate between your connection and the connection of a separate client, and the connection of a separate person. So my first thought would be to say no, you don't necessarily need a guest network for those specific appliances.
Okay, good to know. So, of course, this is a security conversation, so I need to talk about AI. We have all read about, agent-led attacks, lost a lot of sleep about those. I just want to know, do you see AI as having a big impact on wireless attacks?
So First of all, so AI has already been present in the Wi-Fi ecosystem in the form of those wireless intrusion prevention systems that I've talked about a bit earlier. So it is already quite common to encounter AI in Wi-Fi, and it has been for a little while. Right now, LLMs get a lot of talk. They are used currently in automated vulnerability discovery. They can help us find vulnerabilities by analyzing protocol specifications and finding issues in different specifications. Another thing is that, I mean, just in general, for us researchers, AI being a new tool makes it very interesting for us to research. It makes it interesting for us to find out if we can find new things, new vulnerabilities. But I would say that in general, its impact to find new vulnerabilities compared to other techniques, I would imagine it remaining limited compared to things like fuzzing, pen testing, or configuration assessments, or just existing, but as a way to help in those already existing methods.
Okay, so we don't need to lose sleep over it just yet. Cool. We already have enough heat to help us lose sleep. I'd like to circle back just to lead us in towards the Q&A soon. So my first example was connecting to an airport Wi-Fi or cafe Wi-Fi. Is there any way to connect safely, for lack of a better word, to a public network?
Yeah, I mean, I can never guarantee that your Wi-Fi connection will be 100% secure, but you can already take a few steps to mitigate some risks. So the first thing I would suggest would be to ask the staff for the name of the Wi-Fi network, and also when you are, checking out the list of networks around you, try to make sure that the network name only appears once in your list of available networks. If you see it more than once, it could potentially point to an evil twin attack. I would suggest keeping your software and web browsers up to date. This is actually probably my most important tip because as I've said earlier, attackers, when they see they get access to your Wi-Fi traffic, oftentimes what they will try to do is they will try to launch higher layer attacks. And how they will do that is that they will go through a list of existing vulnerabilities that have not been patched yet by your browser. So if you keep your browser up to date, normally you already mitigate quite a lot of those risks. Then I would definitely suggest trying to use more layers of encryptions for your application layer, use things such as DNSSEC. A lot of people also recommend using a VPN. For me, I find it a bit difficult to give advice on whether a VPN should be used or not, because the thing is, with a VPN, it is no longer the case that your Wi-Fi network can be, it's no longer the case that a passive listener can see all your traffic, but now it will be the case that the VPN provider will be able to see all your Wi-Fi traffic. So here you really do have to make sure that you trust your VPN instead of the people around you in your Wi-Fi network. So that's for during. And then after, I would recommend removing the network from your list of known networks. Definitely, it's never a bad idea to change passwords if you feel like this is necessary. And you should also always, in general, look for suspicious payments on your bank and then call your bank if you find out that there is an issue.
Great. Thank you, Héloïse, for these very useful tips. Everyone, you can start checking out the documentation part. Héloïse also added some additional references in there and resources to help you, which I think could be quite helpful. Now, I'm going to give her a little bit of time to catch her breath and take a look at the questions from the Q&A part. If you have any, this is the moment to put them in the Q&A part of the chat or upvote the questions that to you are really important. In the meantime, I have a couple of announcements. There will be more webinars coming up. The first one will be our usual CTI webinar, which is the QCTR, and that will take place in the afternoon of the 15th of July. And as for the team of Cyber Tips, we are taking a little break over the summer. So we will be resting, enjoying the holidays, but we will be back on the 3rd of September. Of course, we are still open for suggestions about topics. So if there are topics you really want to hear about, please let us know, whether that is in the chat or in the pop-up survey that will be on your screen after the end of today. On another note, we're also looking for colleagues. So if you are looking to make a change, or if you know anybody else who is looking to make a change, please join us at the CCB, check out our vacancies, and to apply. Now we have just a few minutes for the Q&A. So Héloïse, are you ready to answer your first question?
Yes, so I see a lot of interesting questions. I will try to answer as many of them as I can. So the first question that I'm seeing is what is the easiest way to detect rogue access points? They often use the same SSIDs and get their IP address via DHCP. So I would say that the most common method to defend against this, as far as I know, is to whitelist MAC addresses. So when the network detects that it is getting traffic from a specific MAC address that it doesn't know, it will block traffic from that kind of from that MAC address. Okay, so somebody's asking, what is my advice for hosting a public Wi-Fi network in the Netherlands? Public room is used a lot for public Wi-Fi networks. So I have personally never heard of a public room, but if it is anything like something like AD-room, for example, where you will have each user that can have their own sets of credentials, then I would say you definitely can use that. Otherwise, if you want to just have a public Wi-Fi network, but where the users do have some form of protection, at least from passive listeners, I would suggest configuring an open Wi-Fi network, either with a WPA3 protected password, or at least using enhanced open. Enhanced open won't be protected with a password, but it will at least protect the user from passive listeners.
And I think we have time for just one more question.
All right, so somebody's asking, is it safer to connect my computer to the internet through my phone's 4G or through the hotel open Wi-Fi? So normally the 4G will provide a form of encryption on the link layer. So it is definitely more secure to have it on that link layer. But it is definitely more secure to use 4G rather than to connect to the open Wi-Fi network, where there will not be any encryption. There will be barely any encryption on that link layer.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much for being so clear and so focused on answering questions. I think that's definitely very useful. So we are now at the end of today's webinar. Once again, a really big thank you to you, Héloïse, for sharing actually actionable tips to improve our cyber hygiene at home, but also in the workplace. Thank you really so much for coming. I see a lot of messages that it was a great presentation, so thank you for that. And thank you to all of you for watching. I look forward to seeing you after the summer. And in the meantime, please do enjoy your holidays. Bye.